we're going to call to order the Tuesday, April 20th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Mongan?
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Here.
Mayor Casissa?
Here.
Mayor Beckman?
Here, thank you very much. Please join me in the salute to the flag.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, guys. I just realized that that is actually later in our agenda, but we've done it now, got it out of the way. We've got the closed session now. So we've got a closed session item that is public employee performance evaluation and appointment. The position title is town attorney. I believe first we need to take public comment on the closed session item. Is that right, Amy? All right.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna open this up for public comment. We have one member of the public who just joined. So just to restate, we're going into closed session right now, and the closed session item is public employee performance evaluation and appointment for the town attorney position. If you would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we get any public comment emails for this item?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comment.
Great, thank you. And we have no hands up. So the council is going to adjourn to closed session now, and we're going to come back to this Zoom meeting at 6:30 for the open portion of our regular meeting. So we will see you then.
Thank you.
Council does not want me present.
That's correct. I'll cover it.
Okay.
You can take a couple minutes off, have a little dinner.
Okay, thank you.
It's recording again. And you're good.
Great, thank you. And I think we're just waiting on Bob.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll get the timer ready.
Great, thank you. And as soon as Councilmember Ravazio is back, we can go ahead and pick up. There he is. Alrighty, great. So we're going to resume. We are now coming back from closed session, resuming the open portion of our meeting. We're going to report out from closed session. The council did not take any reportable action in closed session, and that item was public employee performance evaluation and appointment with regards to the town attorney. Now we're going to go to open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on our agenda to do so, and members of the public will be given 3 minutes apiece. If you'd like to speak on any item that's not on our agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. And we're going to start with Roy.
Good evening. This is an article or part of an article from EV Wind, The Realities of Bird Bat Deaths by Wind Turbines. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates there are between 140,000 and 500,000 bird deaths that occur at wind farms each year. Most significant threats is posed to large or species of large, threatened, and high conservation value birds, such as golden eagles, bald eagles, burrowing owls, red-tailed hawks, peregrine falcons, and prairie falcons. You know, these large birds only have 1 or 2 chicks and brood less than once a year, and their deaths are a far greater impact on the overall species. Wind turbines have also been found to be one of the leading causes of mass bat mortalities, with some species dying as much as 880,000 bats per year. Unprecedented number of migratory bats are found dead beneath industrial scale wind turbines during summer and late autumn in North America and Europe. There are no other well-documented threats to population of migratory tree bats than the cause of mortality than the wind turbines. Bats may not be many favorites of people, but they play an important role in the planet's ecosystems. Not only do the aerial mammals consume forms of pests and insects, they also are instrumental in pollinating flowers and dispersing seeds to regenerate rainforests. Wind turbines are a real threat to wildlife. And I also ask, to save time, please pull item 4C. And before I comment, I hope that the summary section is read, and then also read from the Corte Madera Chronicles for the week of April 16th, the first paragraph of the Go 100% Renewable section. So that's the first paragraph of that article. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roy. We do not have any other hands up for open time. Did we get any emails for public open time?
No emails were received for public open time.
Great, thank you. So seeing no other hands, we're going to close open time for public comment. There are no presentations, which brings us to the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. Any member of the council, staff, or public can pull an item from the consent calendar for discussion or comment on the consent calendar as a whole. I'm going to ask if any members of the council would like to pull any items from our consent calendar. I will, on behalf of Roy, pull 4C as he requested. No, staff doesn't want to pull anything, right? Great. Okay, we're going to open this up to public comment. So 4C has been pulled. If any members of the public would like to pull any other items from the consent calendar for specific discussion or comment on the consent calendar overall, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public@tcmmail.org. We just got a hand up from Roy. And Roy, I'll just remind you as I bring you on here that we have just pulled 4C for you, and we're going to come back for public comment on 4C after we pass the balance of the consent calendar. Did you have anything additional that you wanted to share besides about 4C?
Yes, I would like to share it. However, I would like the information to be read by 4C, so my comment makes sense.
Okay.
So there's a summary of 4C on the agenda, so I would like that read. And then I would also like read from the Corte Madera Chronicles from the past week, 416, the first paragraph of the article, Go 100% Renewables on Earth Day.
Sure. Okay. So we're going to come
Because
to
that
you,
would take up my entire time just to read those things.
well, Amy, please advise me, but I don't know if we can have the public direct staff to read outside documents at a meeting. Is that inherently public comment?
I think it would be better for Mr. Wolford to read the article during public comment. That is his time to speak. And so if there's information he'd like to convey to council, that would be the time to do it.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So Roy, we're going to pass the balance of the consent calendar or take a vote on it. And then we're going to come back to 4C. And if it's okay with Amy, we can do public comment before questions. So the comment can be the first item, the first thing we do on 4C, so that we can get that paragraph read so that your comment makes sense. So with that, don't have any other hands up for making any public comment on the consent calendar. We're going to bring it back to council for a motion on passing items 4A, 4B, and 4D through 4G. Yeah, Fred?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. That looks like a second from Charles. Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much. And we're going to come back to 4C now. So this is, the item title is Adopt Resolution Number 15/2021. 1, endorse Clean Energy Deep Green Program in alignment with the Town of Corte Madera Climate Action Plan. And 2, allowing 2 temporary signs in the public right-of-way from April 21st, 2021 to May 5th, 2021, publicizing the Marin Clean Energy Deep Green Program. And if it's okay with the council, I'd like to begin this item with public comment. Any objections? Okay, we will do so. So we're going to open item 4C to public comment now. If you'd like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org, and comments will be given 3 minutes apiece. We will start with Roy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, from the chronicles, the Go 100% renewables indicates opt up to deep green to ensure 100% of your electricity is coming from California wind and solar. And I've brought this issue up with the council before on these whole renewable issues in MCE. Every customer gets the same electricity delivered to them, whether they are purchasing it from PG&E or MCE. For example, if we have 3 houses, one's PG&E, they'd be, if they're using 529 kilowatt hours, they would pay $147.50 a month. Light green users would pay $157.80. That's higher, it's about $10 higher. And then deep green, $163. That's 11% premium. Now, the electricity that is on the grid comes from many sources. PG&E, 36% of their electricity they put on the grid comes from solar panels. 43% comes from nuclear, and then the other are generated from fossil fuels. So there's a lot of fossil fuel on the grid that people are getting. So 3 houses right together, they're going to be getting the same electricity. 3 houses across town, they're getting the same electricity. It's like you go into a supermarket and you go up to the meat counter and you ask for a pound of filet mignon and you get a pound of ground chuck, and you complain and say, wait a minute, I ordered filet mignon. That doesn't matter. It's what you pay for. It's not what you get. Okay. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And paying higher energy costs just doesn't make sense. So please, let's have a little forthright honesty and talk about what the consumer is getting. And that really needs to change. And I think you need to take a look and be very honest and let the customers know that you are not getting 100% renewables delivered to your house. Now, if you want to save the birds and the bats, go with PG&E's renewable program. It's 100% renewable, and it's 100% solar. MCE's renewable is 50% turbines, wind turbines. A lot of birds, a lot of bats being killed. That's not eco-friendly. So let's have some honesty in these programs and let the people know what they're getting and what the issues are. We shouldn't be paying more money for energy. The town should be looking for the best value, not an ideological value in this whole renewable energy business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. We do not have any other hands up for public comment on item 4C. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comment on this item?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comment.
Great, thank you. Then I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for any questions or comments. And if there are none, a possible motion on item 4C. Would anybody like to, if there are no questions or comments, would somebody like to make a motion? Yeah, Bob.
I was just going to comment. I was the alternate on MCE for a while. And what does happen is they take, if you put your money into 100% renewables, they take that money and they invest it in 100% renewables. So they're actually building up and getting and creating more sources of renewable energy. And Roy's correct, the electricity that comes to your line is electricity. It's arguably the same electricity, but that's because MCE uses PG&E lines. So I would go ahead and make a motion to approve this.
Thank you, Bob. Well put. Is there a second? Looks like a second from Leela. Thank you. Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Mongan, or sorry, Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much. That concludes the consent calendar and brings us to item 5, our public hearings. Our only public hearing of the night is the first reading and possible introduction of ordinance number 1006 pertaining to prohibiting smoking in public places, places of employment, and multi-unit housing. Is there a staff report?
Rebecca, do you want to take this one?
Yes, I will. I'm just a little wobbly on my internet connection right now. Thank you, Mayor and council members. This item is being brought back after the council voted to revisit their approval of the earlier version of the ordinance. And this ordinance is the same as what the council reviewed before, with the exception that it now contains a prohibition of smoking of all smoking of cannabis, including for medical purposes, in all units of multi-unit properties. And this version of the ordinance now allows for enforcement of the ordinance by administrative citation. So the section that was changed is that the section 6.14.110, the exemption was removed that previously allowed for the smoking of cannabis for medical purposes. And I would like to remind the council that they heard extensive public comment in favor of the removal of that exemption and directed staff to remove the exemption and come back to council with a revised ordinance for discussion and introduction. I don't know if the town attorney has any information to add on to it, but it also now includes the enforcement by administrative citation because that was not included in the prior version of the ordinance.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from council for staff on this item? And if not, we're going to go ahead and open this up to public comment. So any member of the public who would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this item?
We did receive several emailed public comments in support of the removal of the exemption. Those emailed public comments have been uploaded to the website and are now linked on the version of the agenda packet that is on the website. And I can read the names of those residents and citizens that submitted the support for the new version of the ordinance. It was Jeremiah Mock, Hermanina Acosta, the Smoke Free Marin Coalition, Pam Granger, Victor Greenfield, Keaton Bradley, and Nady Mendoza.
Great, thank you. And we have one hand up now from Herminia, so I'm going to bring her on for public comment.
Hello, City Council and town staff. Thank you so much for listening to my concern about the smoke-free policy in multi-unit housing here. I appreciate you considering and agreeing to repeal the exemption medical cannabis, as doing so will help to fully protect everyone living in multi-unit housing from secondhand smoke. Please decide to increase the smoke-free policy in and around all multi-unit housing residents, and do not allow any exemption to this rule, including for medical cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do not have any other hands up. Oh, here we go. We've got one more from Pam Granger, so we're going to bring her on next.
Good evening, Mayor Beckman, Council, Pam Granger, Chair, Smoke Free Marin.
I'll send you a link.
I just wanted to give you a couple of points of clarification that might have come up at the last meeting. In the staff report, there's a comment in fiscal impact that it might cost from $10,000 to $15,000 a year in order to do educational and compliance checks, and that the future cost might fluctuate depending upon the number of calls the town gets for code enforcement. Well, you'll be so happy to know that the tobacco-related disease control program in the Department of Health Services is the first responder for complaints, which relieves your code enforcement of usually the points of clarification and sends out letters and notices, and has done an incredibly wonderful job before for you and will in the future. So that actually ought to keep that cost down a little bit more than you think. And then there was also a concern expressed about possible evictions because of people smoking anything that they weren't supposed to. And I just thought I would share that in the course of 30 years, there's only been one eviction in the county, and that was after 1.5 years of working with a particular tenant. And so hopefully that will give you a sense of relief that this is not going to be an irresponsible or an unkind policy, but instead you will have so many people that are going to be excited. As one mom said to me, why should my 6-year-old know what marijuana smells like? We won't have to say that to her in the future. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Great, thank you very much, Pam. We do not have any other hands up now, so we're going to close public comment and bring it back to council for discussion and a possible motion. And the only thing that I will say is I just want to thank our staff for being really good sports about this. This is like the third time this one item has come back before the council, so thank you. And I also want to thank the residents and advocates who have helped kind of prioritize this issue and put this before us. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues. Yeah, Leela.
I second your points and just wanted to call out the fabulous participation we had from so many young people on this issue. It was really great to hear. So stay involved.
Amen. Any other comments? And if not, yeah, Fred, and then Bob. Oh, you are muted.
With that, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second? Looks like Bob. Thank you, sir.
I'll second. And I just wanted to mention one other thing, is that possible?
Yeah, please.
At the request of a constituent, I actually talked to a friend of mine who's an oncologist at UCSF to see if this would cause any problems for people who are using medical marijuana. And he said they do not recommend that anyone who needs medical marijuana smoke it, period. So I don't think there's any issues with that. And I just wanted to get that out there as well. Thanks. I'll second the motion.
Great point. Thank you, Bob and Rebecca. We have a motion and a second. So if we could have a vote, that would be fantastic.
You know, I did want to add, since I didn't add that in my initial report, was that I did send out a notice by email and by mail to everyone that we have on record as owning or managing an HOA or an apartment building or any number of units, duplexes, triplexes, smaller apartment complexes, anyone that we could have an address, mailing address for through the business license department, and anyone that we had an email address for that we contact regularly. And I didn't receive back any questions on the letter. I received a couple thanks for sending it, and one person had said that they already are smoke-free in their complex, and thank you for letting them know about this new change in the ordinance. So I don't know if you can extrapolate support, but I didn't receive any negative feedback or any concerns. And that we did, and after this ordinance, when it's up for a second reading and possible adoption, I'll send that same notice again.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. That concludes our public hearings and brings us to item 6A, our first business item, which is 2021 pension obligation bonds, consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 16, 2021, approving indenture of trust, official statement, and bond agreement. And with that, I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, this has been quite the process and extensive research and public discussion really over the past 18 months. You know, we don't look at this as a one topic item, one way to solve pension liability. This has been something that the council and our staff has committed to over the past few years to really solve our long-term unfunded liabilities. And so a lot of discussion has happened over this, a lot of good work of I call them the dream team. You know, we have our NHA advisors on the call, Craig Hill and Mike Myers. You know, they have truly been advisors for town staff as long as I've been here for the past 5 years, but really, you know, going all the way back to the mid and late 2000s. So they've been with us for a long time. They've helped us through the tough times and really appreciate their guidance. And you also have our, you know, as part of our Finance Subcommittee, again, we have Larry Reed, Jim Andrews, Annette DeSano, Carl Spurzum, and our great Finance Director, Daria Carrillo, who have really, you know, taken this issue and helped us get to this point. And so tonight we're asking you, after much discussion and direction from council at our April 6th meeting, we're coming back to you with a resolution, and we're asking you to adopt that resolution today to move forward with approving the indenture of trust and official statement and bond purchase agreement. And again, I'll share my screen. I just want to show you all, again, the importance of what we're talking about here. Sorry. I got my second COVID shot today, and it was at 9 o'clock this morning, and it's starting to hit me.
Oh, no.
Easy. I know. I'm like, I thought I'd be okay. All right. If I get in trouble, just jump in and save me, somebody. Okay. So again, one of the things that has happened between April 6th and right now, it was really a critical piece for this item, as well as the next item that you'll hear. We basically took all of the great work we've done over the last 5 years, and then really the tools in our toolbox, what our plan is going out 15, 20 years. And we went through this process, and it's really, we had to get rated again by S&P, and they had to come in and give us our official bond rating. And so that was a really important process. It's one that, you know, coming out of COVID, even our financial advisors, we weren't really sure what was going to happen. We know we've been doing all the right things, but again, you have to go through it. They look at our town as a whole, and we'll talk about, you know, some of those practices and procedures that they evaluated. But what I'll tell you is that since April 6th, that process has taken place. And the staff and the financing team have finished that credit rating process with Standards & Poor's, and they have officially upgraded our issuer credit rating from AA+ to AAA, which is the highest rating. And so that's all the good work of this council, our advisors, the team. We've been talking about it a lot, and now we got rated, and they've evaluated us again, not only what we've done to get here and improve on since 2016, that was our last rating, but what we've done. And it's another confirmation that we're on the right path. We're strong, not only now, but, you know, into the future. And so I'm just really proud of that. So congratulations to everybody on that. The other thing that council directed us on April 6th was how should we amortize this plan? And so we looked at the 24-year pension obligation bond. As you can see here, you know, in the blue, the light blue, that's the Corte Madera current unfunded liability lump sum payments projected by CalPERS. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to flatline our payments over a period of years. And so that's what that dark blue line does. Over 24 years, it flattens our payments. And so we have knowns now when we project out in our 10 and 15-year financial projections. This really helps staff. The other thing that it does is it allows us two things. One, it has an early call feature. So if we decided we wanted to pay this off in 20 years, 18 years, we could do that early. And that'll come into the conversation down the road with our current pension trust that has $4 million in it right now. And so this positions us to call this early at any time. And so we gave the future leaders a lot of decision points and a lot of things to think about and tools in their toolbox. If they want to pay it off early, they can. The other thing it does is it allows us ultimate flexibility. And so again, we're gonna fund, the funded ratio will be 97%. We didn't want to fully fund it because again, we don't want to overfund our liabilities either. And so we wanted to be a little bit conservative there. The other thing is right now you can see the projected interest rate is about 3.18. Again, we'll see where we land in the coming weeks. We'll find that out shortly. But at the bottom, you see that 815 average annual savings, and we'll call it an arbitrage, right? And so that was the other piece that was really important to us of how we were evaluated as a town. And so on an annual basis, the council on April 6th approved a policy, and they approved the policy, a lot of these policies, but our reserve policies, but also a mechanism that gets evaluated first through the Finance Subcommittee on an annual basis on what is our rate of return this year? Like, what is that arbitrage, that $800,000? Okay, now how did CalPERS perform? Do we want to recommend and put money towards CalPERS unfunded liability? And then once we get from there, do we want to put money in our pension trust, into the, you know, the OPEB retiree health trust? Do we want to put money in reserves? There's an annual basis per policy, and you'll have a recommendation every year in advance from the Finance Subcommittee of how you should think about that arbitrage. We're just not saying, okay, we solved our problem and we're putting it in the bank. It's an annual basis because there's so many factors, as we all know, and it's really complicated. And so council has really directed us per resolution, a policy on how we should think about that on an annual basis. And the other thing is to get to the AAA rating, you know, a portion of it's rated on council and management, how we, the policies and procedures that we put in place, you know, really are we walking the walk and talking the talk in both what we do in action and policy. And these 8 boxes that I usually talk about for 5 hours, our advisors were kind enough listening to me talk for so long, put it into 1 page and into 8 boxes here. And so this is something we'll post, I'll send it to council, but this is really what carried the day for us moving forward. We have an investment policy, our debt management and disclosure policy, our reserve policies. We now have, we're going from a 10% reserve to a 20%. We also have an additional 10% emergency reserve. So we have 30% in reserves. We built our pension and OPEB trust combined to about $7.5 million. That pension trust of $4 million was built really since 2018. And so think about that for a second. I mean, a lot of good work. The capital improvement program, which was really important to the infrastructure of our town, having a 5-year capital improvement program, but really looking at it every 6 months and evaluating it as we go. Having the 15-year funding stream for that. Our budget practices of everything we talk about all the time, bottom left. The financial forecasting and pension modeling, we now have modeling where we can model out 10 years for our operating budget. We can model out 30, 40, 50 years for the pensions in real life time. As you know, a lot of times when you get an actuary report for your unfunded liabilities, it's a snapshot in time 2 years ago. Well, we can do it up to the minute based on decisions of council. When you think about MOU increases, how does this impact us in the long term? Council is no longer blind in their decision making. You have the tools you need. Cybersecurity is a #1 issue for this council. You know, moving forward, we're part of the Bay Cities risk pool. We're currently under contract for a cybersecurity analysis, and that's ongoing right now. Rebecca and the team is overseeing that to really analyze and give us best practices and any recommendations moving forward that we should think about. And we'll tie that into the town hall building infrastructure project as well, making sure we have all the tools in the toolbox that we need to be safe going into the future. And the other one is the oversight committees. We have the Sales Oversight Committee, Tax Oversight Committee that normally evaluates us, you know, like most oversight committees after the fact. Did we spend the monies appropriately? And that's really important. But what we also do is we talk to them in advance of budgets to say, this is how we're thinking about spending the monies. Give us recommendations, and we have a conversation that we can share now with council, you know, when you think about budgets. And so that's very unusual, but it's something we're very proud of, and it's the expectation of council. And the other one is the Finance Subcommittee. Everything that we have done, everything financial, has always been worked through them over the months and years. We don't bring anything to council, you know, without them, you know, thinking about it and giving us some feedback. And again, we don't always agree, you know, but that's okay too. It's important for council to have that 360 information. I believe on the management side and the decisions that this council has really, you know, directed staff to move forward with was one of the big reasons through COVID that we got this consideration to AAA. And so I'm really proud of everyone on this call and the team. It's a lot of hard work, and I just really wanted to point it out regarding the AAA. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to answer any questions. This information is on the website. Again, we've talked about this for 18 months. And really now it's to the point of decision making to approve this resolution and really get us that good interest rate and allow us to do the things we need to do. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Todd. Do we have any questions from the council for staff on this item? Yeah, Fred?
Yeah, just a quick question. Todd, on the callable part, do we have to wait at 8 or 9 years before we can actually prepay some of those bonds? Is there a waiting period?
Yeah, and I have Craig and Mike on the call. They can jump into, but I believe that the way this is set up, it's right around year 9, you can start to call the bonds. And realistically, you know, if you look at how we're set up, that would be the minimum that we would be positioned to start thinking about calling bonds early anyway. when you do the analysis of our projections.
And then the other question is also I know one time I think we were talking about like 95%. It looks like got pushed to 97%, which I'll rely on the experts, but I guess we have enough of a cushion there with that 3%, correct?
We do. And again, CalPERS underperformed the previous year, which would increase that unfunded liability. And that's something we took into consideration when we looked at the funding mechanism. And also the good news that offsets that is they're overperforming this fiscal year by double digits. So in looking at that analysis, they did a lot of stress testing, and this is the recommended kind of landing spot we feel comfortable recommending.
Okay, and then just one last question on the timing. So we'll know within 2 weeks what the rate will wind up being when it's somewhat finalized. I want to say it goes to market.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Chris Lynch, I didn't mention you on this call. Thanks for being on. I'm going to turn that over to the team. Can one of you answer the vice mayor's question?
I think I need to promote Mike Meyer and Craig Hill to panelists.
Yeah, can you bring Craig over? I'm sorry, it's a good question.
Well, this is Chris Lynch from Jones Hall. I can answer in the interim. The plan is to print the POS, the preliminary official statement, which is the disclosure document, on Thursday. We take about a week to market the bonds, after which they be priced in the middle of next week. And I believe we're scheduled to close on May 6th. So it's a very accelerated, quick process because every day that passes unclosed means you're spending more money at CalPERS. So we've pushed the financing to close as quickly as possible.
Okay, thanks. And it's great that rates right now are extremely favorable. And hopefully they stay that way.
Exactly.
Great, thank you, Fred. Any other questions from council for staff or the consultants? And if not, we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. So any member of the public that would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org, and we'll be doing 3 minutes apiece. Rebecca, did we get any email public comments on this item?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comments.
Great, thank you. And I am not seeing any hands up from the public, so we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and a possible motion. And the only thing that I want to say, just to kick us off, is how proud I am of our town. We got clobbered in 2008 by the recession, and now we've come back with a AAA credit rating. We earned that through hard work, and that's huge credit to our staff, the residents that have been involved, our financial consultants, and decisions that have been made by this and previous councils. And I just think it's a real testament to the results that you can get when you put fiscal responsibility first. And I think Corte Madera is a great model of that. So I just wanted to kind of hats off to everybody who had a hand in shaping this big step forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to anybody else. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I'll move that we approve resolution number 16-/2021.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a second? Fred, seconds. Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you again to everybody who was involved in this. And that brings us to item 6B, which is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 17/2021, approving the execution and delivery of lease certificates of participation to finance the town hall remodel. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, we have our experts on this call that can really explain way better than I the mechanism of what we're talking about. But I wanted to step back for a second and talk big picture again. When we were evaluated on our big picture infrastructure process, this was an important point too in our AAA rating and in our outlook. And so what we're talking about now was evaluated too by S&P on what we're thinking about doing, obviously, right? And so I want to point out, on the staff report, it's on page 1, when you talk about town hall project, again, this has been an over 2-year project in conversation in the public. A lot of good work got us to this point. It hasn't been council driven, it hasn't been staff driven, it hasn't been community driven. It's been all of us really working together to build something I think that we can all be proud of that solves a long-term issue for us. One of the things in early January that we brought to council that made it a little bit more unique and dire was coming out of COVID and the current state of our facility, that we weren't going to be able to reopen it and how we normally were used to. And so we were we presented council with a set of options to start a multi-meeting conversation of, you know, what are our options? Do we lease? Do we just kind of get by for a few years? Do we look at this project that we really invested our time and effort in and we believe in? And so with that, you know, looking at the lease, looking at what it cost to lease, even through COVID, the range was about $450,000 to $600,000 annually in our community. We looked at about 18 areas within town. And so once council directed us to move forward as the priority option one, the town hall project, we then got with the financing team and really just started to focus on long-term, going out 15, 20 years, looking at what we're doing with the POBs, unfundeds, operations, services, infrastructure. What's the best way to finance the town hall project without impacting our 5-year capital improvement project plan that we promised our taxpayers through the sales tax measure, right? We didn't want to impact it short-term and long-term. And so that's what really brought us to what's before you today. It was to talk about, okay, what does this project look like? And one thing that I really want to point out, because I think I will fix it at the end of this meeting and we'll repost the staff report because it's really important. So the staff report is misleading. And under the town hall project, it says this is an approximate $9 million project. Well, let's back it up to our previous conversations in January. This project has always ranged, kind of jumped around between $9 and $10 million over the past few years, depending on options that we've talked about. One of the options that we talked about at a previous meeting, and you guys will consider this in May, is if we went, zero carbon, zero carbon emissions, or if we did some of the other improvements that we talked about with the glass structure on the north side of the building, that there are certain decision points that will raise costs. We also talked about, the difference of, we were trying to save money regarding the remodel. Hey, we want to take this current building that we can't use, and we're going to try to remodel it to save money because it's, approximately $300 a square foot to remodel, and it's $800 approximately to rebuild. Having a lot of discussion with community members, this council member Lee, a really good discussion, who knows this industry and business well as well. It's kind of like, hey, I think you're underestimating, what you think a remodel is. It's usually costs more than to rebuild, to remodel than it is to rebuild. You might want to go back to the drawing board. And I think over a period of meetings and time, staff has been challenged with that. And we're going to come back to you in May with some of those revisions. But what I want to say is, with that revision and looking at high level cost, this is probably closer to a $10.5 million-ish project. Again, depending on some decisions that you make in May, based on energy efficiency, doing some of the things that we think we want to do as a town moving forward. If we're going to expect others to do it, we should lead. So that is always, it's been a moving target. It's ebbed and flowed a little bit. And so it's one that I really want to clarify to the community and council, as and even though we're saying, hey, we thought remodeling would save money, it might not have, right? And so we took that to heart. Again, we're ultimately not going to know what the bids are until we do a bid package. And, council can decide at that point, do we overestimate, do we underestimate? It'll be in the 10.5 million range, I think. And so I definitely wanted to spend some time to clarify that. Again, there's a bunch of staff reports and analysis leading up to this meeting that we can all go to. It's been documented. So it's not like we promised this and now it's going to be this. We explained, the differences of decision points and what it means in cost. So that's one that I wanted to point out. But again, backing up a second and saying, what are we comfortable, from lessons learned to the shopping center. A lot of people have pointed out the shopping center. Hey, you're going to do the same thing. You're following the same mechanism as the shopping center. That's what got us in trouble in 2008. It's a totally different kind of mechanism of what we're thinking in our analysis. One was, what was purchased, when that shopping center was purchased, and ultimately when it was evaluated for what it was worth, again, we almost owed $5 million more than what it was worth at the time. And that was the first point of that just perfect storm of the downturn. The other thing is we used some of our reserves. And when the downturn hit, we didn't have reserves. And so when you step back of the previous conversation, it's important. We have our reserves. We have 30% in our reserves. We've solve the long-term annual payment process of how we solve unfunded liability so we don't ebb and flow violently that affects services. We've streamlined that now through policy and practice with the POBs for 20 plus years. So now what we're doing is, okay, if we borrow money, how much should we borrow? And borrowing about $7 million is where we landed. What it does is it keeps, over 20 years, it keeps our debt payment at $450,000, which is right where the lowest lease payments would be if we lease space. That's what we use kind of as a starting point to our discussion. The second piece is through the sales tax measure, we can now pay that on an annual basis. We can pay it off early if we decide down the road. So it has an early call feature as well. And it doesn't impact any of our other projects on that 15-year funding stream that I showed you a few times in previous meetings. We can lock it in, we can see it, it doesn't impact us at all. And we can build it into our long-term strategy. Now, how do we pay for the difference, the delta? So we currently have, we're anticipating to have, we currently have $2 million in unrestricted funds within our general fund right now. We're anticipating that to grow to $3 million at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, so July 1st. The following year, we anticipate that to grow again to about $3.6, $3.7 million conservatively. We also have over the next 2 fiscal years in 22 and 23, $4 million available as well to utilize for this project. So when you step back for a second and you say, okay, because cash is king. And so learning from 2008, not touching any of our reserves, we currently will probably have, when we start construction, $3.6 million unrestricted available in our general fund. And we'll also have $2 million each year, next year and the following year, that we'll have available to put towards the project as well. And so the decision that we'll have for council moving forward, we don't have to make that decision tonight, will be ultimately at the next meeting, what are the options of the building that you want to move forward with? What are those costs? And then the start a bid process. And when we ultimately bid this and what it lands at, then we'll have a discussion with council. Do we accept the bid? And how do we want to, is it within our range of $10.5-ish million? And how do you want to pay for it? Through the sales tax fund or through the general fund? The council will have options. And then also you'll have a recommendation of what to do with the remaining dollars. Do you want to put it, within that dollar amount, we want to help our business community too through COVID. Do we want to do anything else for the community of support? Do we want to put any of the monies towards a specific project to move a project up? Casa Buena is our last major project. It's about $3 million. It's our last major project that really we promised the community within our 5-year plan. The design work will be done summertime of this year, this coming fiscal year. And then we have about 8 to 10 months of sanitary district work underneath the street, and then we would start the project. And so there's some discussions of timing as well of how we want to do that. So it's all good news. The main piece for tonight is to understand that I think because we really don't want to borrow more money than we need to, but we also don't want to spend cash when we have options of paying this off at any point. And when you look at where the interest rates are right now, and our finance advisors can speak to it, it just makes a lot of sense. We're positioned, these are historic lows. And it provides us with that flexibility. And again, it's something that I think S&P and others, even at the state level, they evaluate our town. We're in a good position. And this is a happy medium that really, staff's comfortable with recommending. And with that, I'll just stop right there and answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Todd. That was a fantastic and really thorough report. I was going to ask if you could dive into a little bit how we landed at that ratio of 2 million cash, 7 million finance, but you totally covered that. So thank you. Do we have any other questions from council for staff or our advisors before we turn this over to the public? Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Hey, Todd, just clarify the 3.7 million in unrestricted funds that you're projecting. You took a conservative approach to get to that number, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then just to clarify also, because you mentioned Casa Buena, can you just expand on that? Because we came off a community forum last night on the Casa Buena. So I just want to make sure people understand that it's for improvements on that street.
Yeah, so it's a complete streets. We're adding sidewalks, we're, improving the street, safety, everything. A recent discussion that was added is that people wanted to improve lighting as well. And so that was an addition to the project. And as you know, through the home key conversation, we really politically kind of leveraged our support to get a grant funds for that. And so we should find that out in the coming days. We're confident that we will get that grant. But if we didn't, we still are positioned to have a conversation as a town to how we incorporate that into the project. So that's one piece we're just waiting on, but I don't think we're positioned. If we don't get a grant, we can't do something. So that's one piece that's new. The other one is timing. RJ and his team have moved that up a little bit, about 6 to 8 months to really try to move this process. So there's some design work that you'll see in this budget this next fiscal year when you approve the budget if you approve it. There's about $400,000 in design work to finish the design. And then the second piece after that, there's some pretty extensive sanitary district work. As we evaluate the lines through that corridor, there's some pretty major improvements that we have to do. And so it's going to take us a bit longer to get that done. So the second step of the process towards the end of next fiscal year will be to start the sanitary district work. And then towards the end of next fiscal year into the following one, we would start the construction. So there's a few moving pieces, but high level, what I would tell you is in the next 24 months, we're going to improve underneath that street, on top of that street, and the lighting above the street. That's the goal.
All right. And just one last question, and just to clarify, and we're still in a position to meet the 20% reserve per policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Short answer.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Fred. Great questions. And I see our financial consultant, Craig Hill, would like to speak.
Yeah, I just had one quick clarification to what the town manager was mentioning. The financing plan for the town center, we're absolutely looking at having an annual payment of around $450,000. Given that we don't know what the interest rates will be, and we expect that this will be somewhere in the 2% to 3% range. So very, very low, as Todd mentioned, at historical levels. If we have the ability to generate more proceeds at that same payment amount, we will do that. So to everything that Todd was describing in terms of whether we put 7 million into the bucket or 7.1, it's effectively free money to the town, right? Because instead of paying interest, you're gonna get more proceeds. So we're looking to that number will be determined based on the market rate, but it will be something that we'll only know the day we go to market and price the bonds.
Great, thank you, Craig. Do we have any other questions from council for staff or the consultants before we go to public comment? Alrighty, then we're going to go ahead and open this up. So any members of the public who would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcml.org. And we're going to start with Pat.
Hi, thank you. I do support this project at Town Hall, but I'm one of the people who's been working for over 20 years to expand and improve our recreation center. And when it came up all those years ago, it was forced to a public vote and a parcel tax where residents were going to have to pay an annual fee, $59 a year to build a rec center. And I would like a commitment from this council and the management of our staff that we're going to do what we're doing for staff. We're going to do it for the community as well. And not once Town Hall is built, but in tandem to it. Our long-term planning committee for Parks and Rec is working now on what will be a relatively economical and affordable expansion of the recreation center to include some classrooms, which are sorely needed by the community. And I'm having a deja vu. I was told before that we really needed to step back because a police station was desperately needed. And so we did, and the police station got built again without, I don't think we went to the public for money on that. Maybe we did, I don't remember. But we're building now this town hall basically by council decision. And I just want you to know, we're going to be asking you to do the same thing again. So I hope the money is available. It'll probably be about half the budget. We're probably looking at 5 million or less. We'll try. But I just really hope that this is all on your plate, that this is not, we're not going to wait until we're celebrating a new town hall before we get an adequate community center for the town. We need, Ashley has very clearly demonstrated the need for additional classrooms for people of all ages. We had to throw out our intergenerational center, which was a wonderful program made up of seniors interacting with toddlers and young people. And I just really want to see this council commit itself to providing a really wonderful space and adequate space for the community, and not just for town hall. And I know you're creating some community space at town hall, but town hall is not a community center. We have a community center, and we're working to make Town Park Plaza more of an extension of the community center so that we can have the sense of a gathering place. But really hoping that you guys will come around and focus on that and provide the same sort of enthusiastic support for recreation programming and capital investments as you have for town hall. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Pat. We do not have any other hands up right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this?
No, Mayor, we did not receive any emailed public comments. Thank you.
Alrighty, then we will close public comment and bring this item back to council for discussion and a possible motion. And the only thing that I would just like to say in response to our public comment is that I'm really looking forward to seeing the master plan program that our Parks and Rec staff and commission, our fantastic staff and commission put together, especially with the help of community feedback, which they're going to get through a survey. So looking forward to that. Any other comments from council members? Yeah, Bob.
I'll echo that, Eli. But secondly, regarding the issue that is at hand, I think we absolutely should do this evening. First off, financially, we're in a position to do it. You know, we talked about the fact that we've created reserve funds in the budget of 30% in the town budget. We have a $7.5 million in the pension trust fund. And so financially, we're in a position to do this. And also, I think we need to move quickly. And this mechanism versus other mechanisms allows us to move fast. And the reason for that is staff needs offices. They are working under very difficult conditions. They were before COVID hit. Since COVID has hit, it has become even more difficult. Many of them have to work from home. This will give them really good modern offices and will make our staff much more efficient. And finally, Todd didn't, I think, mention this, but this actual funding mechanism was part of the presentation for the bond rating, and we got a AAA bond rating. And that's huge. This was part of that rating. And it was just 10 years ago, by the way, that the Marin County Grand Jury issued a report on the town of Corte Madera saying the town was threatened with bankruptcy because we were in such bad financial shape. And now 10 years later, we're actually in this position. So I wanted to just thank staff on our finance committee for moving ahead, but I'm totally behind doing this and getting this done as quickly as we can. This allows us to move fast. It allows us to save a lot of money and allows us to do it efficiently. Thanks.
Amen to that, Bob. Any other comments from council members? And if not, we'd entertain a motion. Yeah, Bob.
I'll move to approve this.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Looks like Fred and Rebecca, whenever you're ready.
Excuse me.
It looks like Chris Lynch has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, excuse me. This
Oh,
is Chris
sorry.
Lynch from Jones Hall. We're acting as the bond counsel. And
Thank you.
I think we should add into section 3 of the resolution a not to exceed principal amount of 7.5 million. If you can add that to your motion. There are two parties to this financing. One is a corporation that's adopting a separate resolution that's acting as the counterparty and will assign the city's lease payments to be certificated into securities. And it has adopted a resolution approving a not to exceed amount of 7.5 million. I think that same not to exceed amount should be added in section 3 of the resolution, just so there's an absolute clear record on what the town council is approving tonight. And I apologize, I didn't have it in there before.
Thank you. And just for process here, I don't know if Todd or Amy want to weigh in on that.
Are you saying added into section 3 of the resolution on page 3, the sale of certificates?
That's right. The town council is approving the sale of the certificates. It's approving a not to exceed underwriter's compensation and a not to exceed true interest cost. And I think it would be useful to add one more sentence. The town council also approves a not to exceed principal amount of 7.5 million.
I think we can do that under the Brown Act. I think people were on notice adequately of what the item was, and this is an amendment that falls within the scope of the item.
And the staff report talked about the amounts of the financing as well.
Todd, you're
Fred,
okay
yeah.
with that too?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that makes sense because I think the other thing it does is that it caps out how much money we can get. I think it makes perfect sense.
And Todd, you're on board with this? Doesn't change the intent of what we're doing here?
Correct. Yes.
Well, then I'll amend my motion for what the town attorney just stated we should do.
And I'll keep my second.
Great.
I
Thank
think
you.
the motion is to approve resolution number 17-2021 with an amendment to section 3 of the resolution to add a sentence that provides that the town council approves the sale in a not to exceed amount of, I believe it was 7.1 million.
0.5.
7.5 million. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but that was great. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Rebecca, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I was taking notes. Was it 7.1 or 7.5?
0.5.
Okay, that's what I have. That the amendment is that town council approve the sale in a not to exceed amount of $7.5 million added to section 3.
Perfect.
Okay. Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And that brings us to item 6C, just consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 18-2021, adopting an amended policy implementing provisions of the municipal code pertain to small cell wireless infrastructure. And I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Beckman and council members. Good evening. This is an item tonight we are bringing forward for your consideration and possible adoption of a amended policy related to the application requirements, review procedures, and evaluation criteria for right-of-way agreements applications for small cell wireless communication facilities. And this is really a continuation of a policy discussion that staff and the town council has had over the last 3 years, beginning in 2018, in anticipation of the deployment of additional small cell wireless facilities throughout town, and particularly in the town's right of way. And just to put a finer point on that, let me see if I can share my screen real quickly. At the end of the staff report, I think it's staff page attachment 5. There's just a diagram. This is a sample diagram of what we're talking about in terms of small cell wireless facilities, as images are worth 1,000 words in this case in terms of what these facilities are. But essentially, we're talking about attachments to existing utility poles in the town's right-of-ways that would allow for wireless communication, such as Wi-Fi access and things that we use all the time with our phones, in anticipation of the need for essentially 5th generation technology. And so right now, and 4th generation technology in terms of the wireless communication. So the images, and hopefully you can all see this on my screen, but can I get a quick nod just to make sure that you're all seeing? All right, good. The left are showing the wooden utility poles that we have throughout town in the right-of-ways. These are PG&E poles in Corte Madera, and you can see attachments on one side of them or at the base or even hanging on some of the wires. And then you can also see some of them would be attached, ideas that they're attached to the top of the poles. And then on the right-hand side of this image, you're seeing actually how they might be attached or located on street lights in the public right-of-way as well. And again, these have not been deployed in Corte Madera. Many of these small cell wireless facilities have been located and deployed in larger cities at this point. But the expectation is that the wireless industry will be rolling these things out and these facilities out throughout the nation over the coming years. And really, this is technology that I think the thrust of this and what we're talking about tonight, it's technology that is really regulated and governed by the federal government through the powers granted by the United States Congress and the legislature to the FCC after legislation and their implementing powers. The FCC has created many rules and orders governing the deployment of these facilities, and essentially much of what we've talked about over the last couple of years relates to those orders and our relatively limited local land use authority in terms of how we can regulate their deployment in town and in the right of way. The town itself started this discussion, as I mentioned in the staff report, with a discussion in October of 2018, where we sort of laid out what these small cell wireless facilities were and talked about recent rules and orders by the FCC. The town adopted an ordinance in February of 2019, clarifying who must apply and including some indemnity language in our existing municipal code in Title 12 of our municipal code related to indemnity provisions. The town council in 2019, in August of 2019, adopted the town's current policy for small cell applications and review and creation of small cell wireless facility applications to the town through the town's right-of-way agreements. And that's essentially how we govern the deployment of these facilities in the town's right-of-way through right-of-way agreements. And in addition, right around the same time, the town joined and participated in joint litigation challenging the Federal Communications Commission's declaratory ruling and order of September 26, 2018. And that process was fairly lengthy, and I'm going to we have a memo in your staff report, I believe it's attachment 3, that explains and summarizes that legal action, but was going to turn it over real quickly to Assistant Town Attorney Ann Danforth, who can just summarize for the council action and sort of wrap up sort of the conclusion of that legal action. So Ann, if you're on, maybe you can just chime in here with.
I am here.
Great, thank you.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Many of you may recall that the number of local governments, including the town of Corte Madera, banded together to challenge the FCC action, which further limited our ability to regulate small cell facilities in the public right-of-way. That litigation was finally decided last August and proved largely unsuccessful at the Ninth Circuit level. The Ninth Circuit ruled that the increased restraints of the shot clock, that is to say the shorter time periods that we are now allowed, was within the FCC's authority. They found that the restrictions on fees that local governments could charge for use of the public right-of-way was also within the FCC's authority. But they disagreed with the limits on aesthetic regulation. Now, the FCC had indicated that aesthetic regulations had to be published in advance, be quote unquote reasonable, and could be no more burdensome than the regulations imposed on other types of technologies. And it was this last portion that the court disagreed with. It said it could be different than other technologies. It did not have to be, objective across the board. However, the reasonable and the shot clock remain significant constraints on any local government's ability to regulate aesthetics. So I'm afraid it's a victory that doesn't carry that much meaning for local governments. Again, that issue was passed down, that ruling was passed down last August. And at that point, the various cities and counties that had joined in litigation challenging the FCC order were faced with a choice. The only recourse was to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court does not accept many requests for review, very, very few, in fact. So at that point, the council was asked if they'd like to continue on litigation, and the council said no. So in fact, I believe most local governments bowed out at that point. The city of and county of San Francisco and city of Portland soldiered on. They filed their petition to the Supreme Court last March. It may be some time before we know the results, but in the meantime, I think that the town of Corte Madera is best served by assuming that the Ninth Circuit decision will stand.
Right.
So with that, if the council has any questions.
Yeah, and just to briefly move forward with the staff report, I mean, given that what Ann just said, we thought it was an appropriate time to come forward and look at our policy again and propose some amendments to the policy, both in relation to the conclusion of with respect to the court's decision, which was as Ann said, handed down last fall or August. And then as well, what we did was we actually reached out and had Timothy, who represented the town in front of the court, review our policy as well. And this was actually done when Teresa was still the town attorney at the time last October. And we worked with Tim Lay to have him look at our policy that was adopted in 2019 and make sure that, to make any recommended amendments to it as well. And so with that, staff has proposed several amendments to our policy. Most of them were to avoid contradiction to the FCC declaratory rules and orders, including those addressed by the Ninth Circuit decision. Obviously, we want to reduce the likelihood of legal challenge from the wireless industry. Two, we wanted to reinforce the town's ability to regulate the aesthetics of small cell wireless facilities. So that's part of what we looked at in terms of the amendments and 5 sections of the policy related to application requirements to aid both applicants and staff in policy implementation. And this really relates to condensed frame within which staff has to review and approve or make decisions on these applications.
Hey, Adam, your microphone is, it might just be me, but I'm getting some kind of electrical tones and you're cutting out a little bit. I think we can get still the bulk of what you're saying, but it's starting to get a little worse.
Okay. Let's see. I will.
How about this? I'll take off the webcam. I'll take off the headset. Does that work?
Yeah, that's good. We can hear you. Thank you.
So really the amendments, hopefully you got that, but I was trying to describe and summarize the amendments fell into 3 buckets. And one was to reduce the likelihood of legal challenge from the wireless industry, reinforce the town's ability to regulate aesthetics as Ann indicated, that was something we still can do, and then clarify and simplify certain provisions of the policy related to application requirements that would aid staff in implementing the policy. And this really relates to the condensed time frame that staff has to make decisions on these applications and the shot clocks that are still in effect and were upheld by the court, and constrain really our ability to do thorough design reviews or things like that, discretionary reviews of these applications because of the time frame within which we need to make decisions. So I'm happy to, and I think both Ann and I are available for questions at this point that you may have. And I'll stop the staff presentation now. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Ann and Adam. Do we have any questions for staff from council? Yeah, Leela.
Just a quick question on the legal issues. So if the Supreme Court were to grant certiorari in that case and a decision were to come down at some point, I'm just curious if you guys have thought through what the implications of that would be. I mean, would we be able to make changes at that point if we wanted to, or what you've thought about that?
If they increase the town's ability to regulate, then of course we would want to come back to you with an amendment. I think that what we have now is a proposal that would be consistent with any likely Supreme Court ruling in terms of not being, I don't think we would, if they got more restrictive than the Ninth Circuit, I think the current policy that we propose would be fine. If they got less restrictive, we would want to come back to you and give you the option of amending.
Great, thank you. Good question. Any other questions from council on this? And I just have one question, Adam, especially in light of the diagram that you showed where there was some equipment hanging from wires, that just kind of got me thinking, how do we provide in our new policy for making sure that any 5G infrastructure that's added, especially if it's added hanging from wires or added to, you know, our old wooden utility poles, is structurally sound and is, you know, physically safe?
Yeah, and actually that is not something that would be permitted pursuant to our policy. Our policy does require, unless the case is going to be made by the wireless industry, that effectively not allowing them to do that would be prohibiting them from actually installing or deploying the wireless facility. Our policy actually says that all accessory equipment and enclosures need to be actually attached. So it would be like the first diagram, attached to the pole itself and not hanging from wires. So that I just showed that as an example, that, you know, that is one way that these wireless facilities have been deployed, but our policy and the design, and we would relate that more to aesthetics. We don't want things hanging from the wires. It's not unsightly. And so really what we want to see is that they're flush mounted to the poles themselves and have a shroud to make them fit in with the pole and painted the same color as the pole itself and things like that. So. Yeah,
I'm just, I guess, thinking that I'm glad that that stuff won't be hanging from the wire in Corte Madera, but I'm just thinking that, like, even, you know, even if you're adding this big new 5G infrastructure to the top of, for example, you know, a wooden telephone pole that's been there for 70 years and may have some rot going on, is probably woodpeckers on it from time to time. I have no idea how much this infrastructure weighs or you know, how that structural load is accounted for.
Right, and there are separate FCC orders, rules and orders that relate to the relationship between the utility company and PG&E, for example, and the attachments that are needed for wireless facilities. And those are sort of my understanding, those stand outside of the town's ability to regulate those particular things. But PG&E certainly, obviously, they're still owning these poles and have every interest to make sure that they are structurally sound and can attach. And in fact, what they're trying to do, as I understand, is leverage that to get, in certain circumstances, new poles or new utility infrastructure as part of this. So, and sometimes I think some cities, they're actually seeing as the wireless industry actually creating new poles or new streetlights or what have you in order to install this the wireless infrastructure.
Okay, so
we can, you know, it's certainly something we can look into more and understand a little better. But it wouldn't be something that the town reviews from a, for example, a building permit perspective or whatnot.
Okay, all right. So it sounds like we're relying on the telecom companies and PG&E to work amongst themselves to make sure that anything that they put on the poles is safe. All right, add that to the list of things that I don't like about this. But anyway, any other questions? Yeah, Fred.
Hey, just real quick, Adam, is it limited the number that they can put up through town? I mean, could they put on every single pole if they wanted to? I don't see that happening, but I don't know much about the telecommunications part of it. Just wondering.
Right. So our current policy that in front of you states that for any wireless provider, they can have no more than one facility every 1,000 feet. So there has to be actually some spacing requirement. And that's based on essentially the range of the actual range of the wireless facility itself. So probably the need is about that 1,000 feet apart. So you're looking at, you know, a quarter mile approximately, which is not every pole clearly. You know, so what we have to avoid is that we can't effectively prohibit the deployment in town. And that's why I think that we're not likely to see it on every pole, put it that way. I think, but we haven't received any applications or proposals in that regard yet. So.
Okay. Do you know if there's any towns or cities in Marin that have received applications?
I'm sure we've actually received an application. So I'm sure there's others that have received applications. The one we received was for 3 utility poles. And again, I want to make the distinction between right of way and then there's private property. And we certainly have wireless facilities on private property on the top of buildings, for example. But this is a policy really for the right of way infrastructure. And so I believe there have been applications in other communities in Marin. The one that we received was ultimately withdrawn, even though it came in. They ultimately decided not to deploy those. And so that never took place. And we still have not received any applications for wireless facilities in our right of way on the utility poles. We have had applications to basically modify existing antennas and wireless communication facilities on private property. A lot of our commercial buildings have these wireless facilities on them today. So.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate the work you and Amy have done on this and staff. Thanks.
And I've got one more question related to Fred's first question. So I know you said that there's a 1,000-foot minimum spacing required. Is that per provider? So like if AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint all wanted to look one street, then we could theoretically, if it was not per provider, I mean, if it was only per provider, we could theoretically have, you know, 5G infrastructure every 333 feet, right? If all 3 of them are loading up every 1,000-foot segment.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't discriminate against, you know, by providers. So if for whatever reason that certain provider could not locate on the same pole as another provider, they could use an adjacent pole, for example. We would obviously try to encourage them to utilize the same pole to the certain extent, you know, to the extent possible. Yeah, that is, again, a possible way that this plays out in terms of how frequent and how close in proximity these facilities are located.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Any other questions? And if not, we'll turn this over to the public. So any members of the public who would like to speak on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email public comment at tcmmail.org. And we're going to start with Pat again.
Thank you so much. This area is a concern to me, and it's not just the quacks and the crazies who are fear mongering over the advent of wireless technology. but Scientific American, which is publicly funded and does research on behalf of the public, has an article from 2019 which says we believe it is our ethical responsibility to inform the public about what peer-reviewed scientific literature is telling us about the health risks from wireless radiation. They have reaffirmed that exposure limits are based on behavioral changes in rats that were exposed to radiation. And more than 500 studies have found biological harm or health effects to exposure to these frequencies. So apparently nobody's listening to the health experts anymore, and we're just going to go ahead and proceed. But what I would ask is that anybody who lives within 300 feet of one of these new 5G towers or 5G, whatever you call them, is notified, and that we do look at them on a case-by-case basis, and we do not let the corporations have greater rights over our community than the residents do. I think we should consider these applications on a case-by-case basis. I think the community should hear about them. I think we should be able to weigh in, and I want to encourage you to read Scientific American. I'm going to send you I'll send you the issue. I think you'll all agree they're a reputable publication, and it's definitely concerning. So please consider doing something to stop corporations from coming in and doing what they will without our understanding or knowledge or protection from the people we elect to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. We do not have any other hands up right now. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments on this?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comments.
Okay, and more hands up. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and a possible motion. Would anybody like to start us off with any thoughts? And if not, I just wanted to share, again, in response to the public comment, I actually have read that Scientific American article, a couple years ago back when it came out, and it does concern me. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, and so I see it as my role to wait for some sort of scientific consensus to emerge on issues like this, where there's potentially a public health application. And my assessment is that it doesn't seem that there is currently a consensus, scientific consensus on whether 5G radiation is safe or not. I realize that what's so frustrating about this issue is that this discussion is kind of beside the point, because we're forced by the FCC regulations and by the court's ruling to vote yes on this item tonight. Otherwise, we run afoul of the law and we exposed Corte Madera citizens to legal jeopardy. And that's, on a case you're going to lose. That's not a stand that I feel that we can take in good conscience. But it is so frustrating, Pat, and I know there's a lot of other residents who feel this way, and I think a lot of us share that feeling. It feels like a loss of local control. It feels like overreach, and it feels like maybe for whether economic or geopolitical reasons or whatever, the federal government is moving very fast on adopting and sort of pushing out more forcefully a technology that I don't know that many of us are totally comfortable with, and I don't know that scientists have a consensus yet on what all of its implications might be. So I don't want to take up any more time, but I just wanted to acknowledge that concern and say that I share it. Any other comments? Adam, are you?
Yeah, just in response to the public comment, I did want to point out that part of the policy does include public notice. So there is a notice provision. I know it's going to be maybe a frustrating notice, but it will be a notice that there is an application within 300 feet of a parcel of property, or our typical radius will get notified of these applications. And so I wanted to just respond to that. And then, yes, I think it's very clear that the actual radio frequency requirements are set by the FCC. And as long as these are within the bounds of those electromagnetic, what they're called, like radio frequency reports, and we will get reports, and we actually have a requirement here that the reports are provided to us annually. So we will be monitoring, make sure that they're within at least the legal limits. But I just wanted to point out those couple things of the policy before, in response to the public comment that we got.
Thank you, Adam. Glad to hear that. Any other comments from council members? And I did just notice that there's another hand up from a member of the public, and I'm not sure if that went up during open time and I might have missed it. So if it's okay with council, I'd like to reopen public comment and just take this one additional comment. Are there any objections? Okay, then we're going to reopen public comment and we're going to hear from Peter Orth. And Peter, you are live, so you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready. Okay, it seems that maybe that hand went up in error, or we may have a technical issue. So Peter, I'm going to take you off right now. Hopefully you're able to get that straightened out. There are no other hands up, so I will close public comment and bring it back to council for any last comments or a motion. And if there are no comments, somebody would make a motion. That would be very helpful. Yeah, Fred. You're muted, but I'm going to say that that looks like a motion.
Sorry, you are correct.
Great, thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Charles. And Rebecca, could we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mongan,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Casissa,
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you very much. That concludes our business items and brings us to item 7, council reports. And we're going to start with the town manager's report.
I have no updates for the council.
All righty, short and sweet. Thank you. We'll go to council reports and we'll start with Charles.
I have not attended the TAM meetings on Thursday. Also on the 22nd, the NTC meeting will take place in which the Casa Buena funding will come up. So anyone in attendance, or if we could encourage people to attend, to lobby for the town and the residents' interest, I think that would be advantageous. So hopefully we have.
Charles, one more time, what was that date?
It's the MTC. It's April 22nd, I think. I don't know the time because I don't do the MTC.
Okay.
But yeah, but that's my understanding, and I think I would assume they allow public comment and feedback on that. So I think that would be a good thing to let them know how excited the public would be for that additional funding. So
great, thank you. All right, anything else? Oh, nope, guess not. Okay, Leela, any updates for us?
Yes, so Fred and I were present at the Casa Buena Community Forum that happened just last night. We had a great group of people from the county and our working group, and we went through and laid out sort of where we're at and how we got here and where we're hoping to go, and took some great questions and comments from the public, and a great meeting. I also attended the Marin Clean Energy Board meeting last week, and the only issue of note there was to approve a sort of a bond issuance that would effectively lower rates for consumers, and that passed overwhelmingly. That's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Bob?
Nothing to report.
Great, thank you. Fred?
The only thing I have is, like Leela mentioned, I wound up kicking off and participating in the community forum last night for the Casa Buena, and just mirror what Leela said. I think it was a great event, just between the partners that we have, and then the community had a lot of good questions. They all got answered. It just went really smooth. I think it's a great way for the communications to be going between the town and our residents. It was just a great event. Thanks.
Great, thank you guys both for your work on that. I just had a light couple of weeks, so only thing I have to report is CMSA had a strategic planning workshop as part of their 5-year strategic plan update, and that went well. I think they're going in a good direction. And then we had a CMSA regular board meeting. This is the Central Marin Sanitation Agency, and they gave a really great presentation about their pilot digester study. So it's looking at the digesters that they have on site there that take organic waste and convert it into essentially green energy through burning it through generators. And so they've conducted a study to see if they can up the capacity, their generating capacity, and it turns out that they can. possibly by up to 40%. So that's some pretty exciting news there. More green energy for the residents of Marin that's generated right here in Marin from our sewage. So that is great. And with that, we'll move on to item 8, which is discussion of draft agenda for upcoming meeting. Do we have any comments on that draft agenda? All right, and if not, we have an SD2 meeting. So I'm going to adjourn the town council meeting and convene the Tuesday, April 20th meeting of the Sanitary District 2 Board of Directors. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Lee? Still here?
Yes, here.
Board Member Mongan?
Yes, here.
Board Member Ravazio?
Here.
Board Vice President Casissa?
Here.
Board President Beckman?
Here, thank you. We're going to wave the salute to the flag because we just did that. Brings us to open time for public comment. Any members of the public who would like to speak on any item that's not on our agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org, and we'll do 3 minutes apiece. Rebecca, did we get any emailed public comments for SD2 open time?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comments for open time.
Great, thank you. And we have no hands up, so we'll close open time. There are no presentations, which takes us to the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require further discussion. Any member of the public or the board can pull an item from the consent calendar for discussion. Would any members of the board like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Looks like none. Would any members of the public like to pull any items from the consent calendar or comment on the consent calendar? If so, please raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. And I am not seeing any. Rebecca, did we get any emails for the SD2 consent calendar?
There were no emailed public comments.
Great, thank you. So we'll bring it back to the board for a motion on the consent calendar. Bob?
Move to approve items 4A through 4C.
Thank you. Charles seconds. And whenever you're ready.
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Mongan?
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio?
Yes.
Board Vice President Casissa?
Muted.
Yes.
And Board President Beckman?
Yes, thank you. There are no public hearings, which brings us to our only business item, 6A, discussion and possible action to authorize the district manager to approve a professional services contract with GHD Group in the amount of $800,000 for engineering and technical analysis for the SD2 sewer master plan update. And I will turn it over to RJ.
Thank you, Board President Beckman and members of the board. Today, I wanted to discuss possible consideration of adoption of or authorization to allow a professional service contract with GHD Group. This is to initiate a master plan effort, which will be a guiding document for the sanitary district about planning capital improvement projects, how we fund those, also looking at maintenance activities, and really all of the infrastructure we have for our collection agency. The last time the sanitary district adopted a master plan was in 2009. So it's been quite some time. I would think that generally, 5 to 10 years would be a normal range of renewing that document. And so we're definitely due, and I think it'll serve us well to move this forward. Separately, I do want to mention that there was some work done in circa 2014 to 2016 where many of those efforts were initiated, and there was some data collection and some analysis performed, but never adopted by the board at that time. And although that wasn't completed, we do have the ability to go back and use much of that data and information as we input that into our model as part of this process. So point being, a lot of that effort will not go completely wasted, and we can use it moving forward. Separately, more recently, in the last year, we did have some settlement agreements with a environmental advocacy group. And as part of that, we did agree to some terms to commit to various analysis, including a pipe condition assessment, as well as looking at all of our pump stations and other infrastructure. And also, we're also committed to funding approximately $5 million over 5 years toward the worst of our degraded pipelines. And so this process not only is one that staff thinks is a high priority, but also one that we've now also committed to. And so the good news is those commitments, like I mentioned, were something that we should be doing anyway. And so we didn't necessarily give up a whole lot in that negotiation, but it is prudent to mention that as we consider adoption or authorization for this contract moving forward. I'm gonna, at this point, turn it over to our experts here at GHD. They're gonna go through some of the odds and ends of this master plan effort. It's a multi-year project and really kind of dives into two main phases of data collection and analysis. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris Brothers at GHD.
Well, thank you very much, RJ. On behalf of, let's see here, on behalf of the group here at GHD, I am pleased to present our solution for the sewer master plan for the town and District 2 here. So we're going to introduce our team briefly. You see the top line here shows the folks that are at this meeting tonight. We have Ann Lynch, our project director, myself, the technical lead on the project, and Tanya Redfield, who's going to be the client manager. Tanya is also a resident of Corte Madera, so she'll be coordinating a lot of the public and stakeholder outreach throughout the project. So yeah, I wanted to just introduce the GHD. Who are we? We're a global firm. We have offices in 130 locations in North America. We have 500 in California on the West Coast, and we do all kinds of things from energy to transportation to structural work to environmental and water resources. And we're well represented here in California. We have offices in Emeryville, Santa Rosa, and San Francisco. So we've done lots of work for folks in this area. And so I think we just want to speak to what we think this project requires. And in my mind, there's four main things. We have an experienced local project team who's got background in field condition assessments and asset prioritization. We have a clear understanding of the drivers here, the community priorities, infrastructure challenges and needs, and these vary from I&I reduction to climate change to sea level rise. So we've got a handle on all those things. We understand how important they are. And then we need to demonstrate that we have a comprehensive support planning system in place. We use best-in-class practices for that, and we've going to be using a proven approach and methodology as well. So I just want to quickly kind of go through the framework that we're using for this master plan. We have worked over the last 25 years with the US EPA to come up with a foundation to ask the right questions for folks doing this work. Really, these get to the heart of what are the current state of your assets, what are the levels of service required, which assets are critical, and how are you going to roll out a strategy to fix the problems with the best return on the investments, right? So this is at the heart of what we're doing here for this master plan. And really, like RJ said, we've got this project broken up into two phases. You can think of phase one as really going out and collecting data. So we're gonna have a desktop and field investigation effort that's going to look at evaluating your pump stations, your force mains, manholes, but most importantly, to meet the requirements of the settlement agreement that we know that you have in front of you is to go out and capture CCTV, so video inspection of your pipes and sewers, right? There's anything not done in the last 10 years needs to be done as part of this project. And so all this information will feed into a decision support system that we'll be using to inform the rest of the project and to deliver this important report that you have in front of you in 2022. And then phase two really takes all this information, the stuff we've done in the past, if we're doing on this project, and puts it through this methodology that, like I mentioned before, which is based on risk. So what's likely to fail and what's the consequence of that, and how risky are things if they fail? Like so all of that gets fed into this model, and we look at the video, the inspection, we perform risk modeling, and we come up with a plan, like I said, that will be based on this. It's a phase and prioritized plan over the next 5 years, and then of course 15 years. We'll be looking at a financial analysis. We have experts that I'll talk to they'll speak to that a little bit later as well. And this will culminate in a master plan report. And this is about a 2-year project we envision. And of course, we'll have Tanya and myself and others engaged with the public and coordinating along the way. So this is all, part of this focused project delivery. I want to spend a little bit of time on the 2 most important aspects of each phase. Phase 1, we're going to be out there over the next, 4 to 6 months. You'll be seeing crews doing this work, and it's the most important part of the project because it's really going to allow us to understand the condition of these assets that haven't been looked at in the last 10 years. And so we're going to use this industry standard NASCO certified scoring of all the defects in the sewers. And so this is going to be a lot of data that we'll need to organize, and this tool that we'll be using, Info Asset Manager and Planner, is really going to be helpful in evaluating the condition of these sewers. You can see here on the bottom of the screen is a snapshot of the tool where it allows you to look at all the defects that you'll see in each pipe, and this will get rolled into phase 2 as we start to make sense of this information. So again, phase 2, this is a busy slide. I know there's a lot here, but I think the key message is that we're creating a decision support tool that's going to take all of your GIS, your field investigations, past data that you've collected on all these assets, right? We're going to roll it into this tool. We're going to use the methodologies that I talked about. So really, what does that mean? It's like, okay, what's the probability of anything failing? What's the likelihood of it failing, right? And you multiply that together and you get this risk, right? And so the risk will be then based on and organized around triple bottom line concepts, which are industry standard. But for this project, what I know is important is the regulatory compliance. So are we going to be able to look at climate change and sea level rise impacts? Yes, we are. And those are going to get rolled in to the modeling, which then based on your prioritization criteria, so things that cannot fail will be given the highest risk class, and those that are not going to have a problem will be pushed to the bottom. And you can see here the output will be wonderful maps that'll display these projects and the risk as it's spread across the system, right? So this is the key part of phase 2. And this is a snapshot of a decision logic tree that we'll be using. And I think the important thing here is that in the past, you may have had decisions that were made and folks said, well, why the heck did they replace this pipe? We don't know why. This tool will allow us to capture and document all of the decision-making we make so that if a board member or a member of the public ever says, hey, why are you replacing that pipe as opposed to doing this, that, and the other? Everything's documented within this tool, and it allows the district a flexible, repeatable, defensible CIP for decision-making going forward. And really, this tool will allow you to have control over your system in maybe ways you haven't before. So it'll become a living, breathing repository of all this information, and it will evolve as you do into the future. And so the key endpoint here is that we're coming to a CIP plan, right, that will be based on prioritized by risk in the short term, and that coincides with the end of the settlement agreement in 2027, which will really be the key projects that we need to address, and then certainly the longer term projects as well. All right, so the final challenge here with this is how do we balance the short and long term funding needs to get these projects done with the finite resources and money that the district has? Well, that's where we turn to our expert rate study and financial analysis firm, Raftellus, and we have Steve Gagnon here to represent them and speak to how we're going to do that at the end of this project. So I'll turn it over to Steve for a minute or so to speak to that.
Yes, thanks, Chris. I assume you can hear me. Good evening, everyone. And I'm Steve with Raftellus. We would be a sub to GHD to perform the financial analysis and rate study, where we assess the impacts of funding the water master plan and the impacts on your sewer customers. Just introducing Raftellus quickly here. We're 140 consultants. We're nationwide. We specialize in financial planning and rate setting and management consulting for water and wastewater utilities. We've performed hundreds of water and wastewater rate studies in California, as you can see by the blue dots on the map there. And then on the right, this is not an encompassing list, but I just put in what we could fit there. We're working for your neighbor, Marin Municipal Water District, doing a financial plan with them. And then I won't go down the list, but you can see just a handful of other agencies that are in your area where we've done either financial planning or rate studies. So with that, we have a pretty good extensive knowledge of rate setting and Prop 218 requirements. And we've partnered with GHD before. We're partnering with them at the city of Berkeley, where we're scheduled to do a financial plan and rate study there. And lastly, I'll just say from experience that not only have we partnered with GHD, but we've partnered with many other engineering firms as well, where we come in at the end and essentially figure out, okay, how are we going to pay for all these capital investments? And I can say from experience that we'll have to run through a handful of scenarios and iterations to find the right balance between what your customers can afford and what you want to build out in the field. That's all I have, Chris.
Great. Well, thanks, Steve. That's really helpful to bring it all together. So I like this slide because it really just shows what we're doing for the next 2 years, right? We're breaking this work into two phases. It's a risk-based sewer master plan, and you can see the bulk of the effort in the budget is in phase one, where we're doing all of that field work and bringing it together in that condition assessment report that's due September of 2022. And you can see the schedule here shows that we're going to be getting out there and proactively making sure that this work gets done so that we get the report done with plenty of time, so that if there's a need for refinements or extra things to do there, we'll have plenty of time. Again, that shifts into phase two in the middle of next year, where we bring all this information together to make the decisions and that culminates in this report. So I think, the final piece of this that we don't want to overlook is keeping the community involved. And I want to let Tanya Redfield have a few moments to speak to that, as she's a resident there, and she's going to be able to lead this project along the way, involved in all the aspects of the community, the stakeholders, and representing GHD in that way. So I'll let Tanya go ahead and speak for a few minutes on that.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Just wanted to reinforce the notion that I have a personal and professional interest in the success of this project. I'm a resident at Madera Gardens and have been working in Marin County for the last 5 years on capital planning and urban planning, and specifically looking forward to working across the various stakeholders in our community and to help, I'll also be providing oversight to maintain operational integrity and to ensure the staff and the technical team and other stakeholders and other subs were all aligned and working together. So looking forward to working with you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanya and Steve. And yeah, on behalf of our team, we're excited to get going on this great opportunity, and we welcome any other questions or concerns that you might have. And that's pretty much the end of our presentation. I can turn it back to RJ if he wants to bring us home, or what the next steps are. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And as mentioned, we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have. And Chris, if you might minimize the screen so we can get a better chance of viewing each other and having a discussion.
Sure. Should I stop sharing then? Is that, or do you want?
Yes. Yeah, we can stop sharing for now.
All right, great.
Great. Well, thank you, RJ. Thank you, Chris, Steve, and Tanya. Great presentation. Do we have any questions from the board for staff or consultants on this? We'll start with Leela and then go to Charles.
Just a question about how this will impact members of the public going about their daily lives. Are there going to be things that are blocked, or sewer or not, outages, or just if you can talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that initially, and the team can jump in as well. So CCTV work is fairly common. Obviously we're going to be doing a high frequency of it, but it has a lot of these activities happen year round anyway. We've had, at least 50 days over the last year where we've had CCTV trucks or other types of maintenance activities going, and it still allows traffic to flow in those things. There are a couple instances where perhaps we may ask a property owner to that may have some impact of service, but it's pretty rare. And in those events, they always get a letter and a knock on the door and close coordination. But I really think that's a very small percentage for this effort.
Great, thank you, Leela. I don't know if any of the consultants wanted to jump in, or if that, Leela, did that kind of sufficiently answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. Charles?
So a few questions. So the you showed some software that basically categorizes the different conditions and will document that. Is that an ongoing program that will be available to public works staff during and after the planning portion of this to stay up to date and have it, like you said, be a living kind of, is that part of the contract, and how far out would that go beyond the 2-year period? And is that something, RJ, ultimately you think would be useful for the town?
Yeah, so we've invested in that tool info asset a year plus ago, and Fernanda Stefanik with our staff has really kind of leaded that charge and got us to this point. But this consultant group is really kind of going to kick us into gear and get it, fully up and running, calibrated, and I see that moving forward, should we do a master plan again in some 5 to 7 year horizon, I think we'll be benefiting from that kind of updated information, where we're kind of going to have to do a little more this first go around. But yeah, it will be a living document. We're going to, yeah, go ahead.
The question with that then is it a third party vendor, or is this something specific to GHD that they're bringing in, right? Because yeah, so this is a separate company that just merged with Autodesk, the maker of AutoCAD. But it's one of the more common software platforms, and Chris or others, perhaps you guys want to chime in on some of the more technical details on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, RJ. Yeah, the tool that the district has is a really solid tool for organizing a lot of this information, getting as detailed as you want on any kind of asset. So really organizing it and being able to really look at all the CCTV data. That's a huge aspect of this project, is to make sense of that data and help inform the rest of the master plan. And so we've got experience with it, and we're going to work side by side with the district and really to get to the finish line with it. So
what I heard you say is it'll be kind of keyed to those sewer areas, and then just like a good LiDAR kind of map these days, you can go and kind of replay in that area to look at it. Cool.
Yeah, we actually have currently several staff members using iPads out in the field, and they're able to click on a pipe to actually see the video in real time. So, I mean, this is fairly cutting edge stuff, and that's really the goal, is kind of cut out all of the, duplication of data input and really just input it once from the field and have all the information accessible from the time you need it.
Great, thank you. And then the other one is I think last year there was some kind of sound test on a local manhole. And is there any of that type of work that actually has audible experiences for residents in this master plan?
Yeah, I believe you're referring to what we call the RAT. It's an audio device that detects blockages, and so that has been going pretty consistently for the last year plus, and I have yet to hear a complaint regarding audio. So it must be at a frequency that really isn't so much detectable by the human ear. But if anyone has heard it, I'm happy to. Yeah. Okay. All right. There we go.
But it wasn't. Ultimately, it was just not a sound that I'm used to hearing in the neighborhood. So I actually went and investigated to see what this thing was doing. Mm-hmm. So part of it is ultimately we're talking about, letting maybe the residents know if there was a lot of that. To follow up on Leela's kind of question of how residents might be impacted by.
So that isn't, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that isn't necessarily part of their scope. That is a kind of your quick and dirty tool for determining if you have any issues that our maintenance team uses and kind of regularly patrols kind of known problem areas. Whereas the tools they're using is the more detailed version, the video, the actual video within the pipeline. And so it doesn't have that acoustic disruption.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Great, thank you, Charles. Any other questions from the board for staff or consultants on this? And I just had one question, RJ. The staff report mentions an RFP process. This is an important project, and I thought it was a great presentation, but it's a really big contract, and there's nothing in the staff report to help us really, assess what the RFP process was, how many bids we got, how competitive they were. So could you just speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, we did put an RFP out in December, and it went out for, I believe, 30 days or longer. We did have several people interested in participating. At the end of the day, we only did receive the one proposal. We have spent considerable time going back and forth with GHD for the past 3 months, really kind of, customizing the scope, fine tuning it. We've also reached out to some of their references to kind of, make sure that we're being prudent with the funds. What was kind of also, at first glance and kind of, looking at budgets and whatnot, we're, thinking like this might be a larger investment than we originally thought. But when you get into it, you realize that a large chunk, if not the bulk of the chunk, is in that phase one, where it's that kind of field video collection effort. And really, there's only so many ways to do it, and you really can't, there's not an efficiency that's going to save you a bunch of money when you have 25 miles of pipeline that you need to video, right? So sure, in the other aspects, maybe there are other types of efficiencies and how a team works, but that was a big, large chunk. And that's kind of why I would mention that, let's say we do another master plan 5 to 7 years after we complete this one, we're going to benefit from all the work that this one does to kind of get our, the brain of our software program, up to full speed.
Okay, so no knock on GHD, but just want to make sure I understand. They were kind of the only responsive bidder, so to speak. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? And if not, we'll open this up to public comment. So if any member of the public would like to comment on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, did we get any email public comments on this item?
Thank you, Rebecca. No, we did not receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Great, thank you. And I'm not seeing any hands up, so we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion and a possible motion. Who'd like to start us off? Yeah, Bob.
I thought that was a really good presentation. As someone who has attended numerous sewer lateral inspections and seen many videos, I can't wait to see the video. But anyway, I thought it was a really good presentation. I think it's thorough. I think we absolutely need to do this. We have old sewer lines. And I would move to authorize the district manager to approve a professional services contract with GHD Group in the amount of $810,608.
Great, thank you. Do we have a second? Fred, it is. And Rebecca, could we have a vote, please, when you're ready?
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Mongan?
Yes.
Board Member Ravazio?
Yes.
Board Vice President Casissa?
Yes.
And Board President Beckman?
Yes, thank you, RJ, and thank you to the team. That was a great presentation. That brings us to item 7, district manager and board member reports. Is there a district manager report?
Yes, there is. So wanted to give an update on kind of the status of our private sewer lateral ordinance. This was went into effect in August of 2018, and really driven by this concept of trying to reduce I&I, which is inflow and infiltration, to really serve as an environmental benefit. Obviously, anytime we get additional water into the pipes, it can overload our sewer system, and so that was one of the kind of the driving factors there. But as part of that, there are 4 triggers that requires a property owner to upgrade their private sewer lateral: sale of property, a capital improvement project on their street, a 50K remodel, or an overflow of their line. And so to date, of the approximately 6,000 private sewer laterals in our collection agency, approximately 670 have been upgraded since that time, so a little over 10%. So So that's definitely some good news. However, approximately 370 of the 1,040 in total have not complied with the ordinance. So we're not alone. You know, we have some of our neighboring agencies who are dealing with some of the same issues where they've kind of proactively rolled out this ordinance, and it all you know, has good spirit and benefits, but there also needs to be this kind of enforcement arm. So we're as a staff, we're kind of putting our heads together and working with some of these other agencies to come up with a aligned procedure that we can start, you know, in a thoughtful way, going around to our community and kind of encouraging folks to really comply with that ordinance. And so just wanted to give you a little status of where we are. So, you know, roughly 1 in 3 people haven't fully complied. So that's the update.
Okay, thanks a lot, RJ. That's good to know. Do we have any board member reports? I didn't think so. All right, that brings us to item 8, discussion of our next agenda. Do we have any comments on that agenda? And if not, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.